Talk about preventing choices and reducing experimentation in American society by trapping those most able to experiment in debt. There are those on Capitol Hill that are trying to prevent this from happening, including our first guest today, Connecticut Congressman Joe Courtney, who is sponsoring legislation to lock in Stafford rates at their current 3.4% rate for low and moderate income students. Congressman, do people in Washington consider how dangerous it is for America to reduce the options for our youth with all this debt?
Barely. First of all, thank you for doing this week, and because it is, in my opinion, a profound, really not just a challenge, but a crisis for our country. In addition to all of the negative impact that you described in your introduction, America now has fallen from #1 in the world in the 1980s in terms of graduation rates to #12. And I mean, when you just sort of think about that fact in terms of what that means in terms of our ability to succeed in the future, this really goes to the heart of whether or not the American dream and our future is going to really have any power to it in the near term. And in the near term, obviously, July 1st is when these interest rates pop up in the Stafford program from 3.4 to 6.8. The president called attention to it in the State of the Union address, which I was thrilled that he took a moment to do that. But the fact is we need to really expand awareness about the fact that, you know, as bad as it is right now, we're going to go backwards even further if we don't address this sunset on July 1st.
Yeah. And educate us a little bit on this particular vein of student lending. Who sets that interest rate, and who decides that interest rate is going to double in July in the first place?
Well, again, as a lot of your viewers know, I mean, there's two different kinds of loans out there. There's private student loans through Sallie Mae, which presently are running at about 8 or 9% interest. Payments and interest accumulates while you're in college, and they are non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. They are extremely burdensome for young people coming out of college. The Stafford Student Loan Program, which was named after Senator Stafford a number of years ago, was an attempt to try and stabilize the cost, protect students from interest buildup while they're actually attending school, and try and set a more moderate interest rate. When I came to Congress in 2007, we passed the College Cost Reduction Act, which cut the interest rate from 6.8 down to 3.4%, but it was a 5-year term, and as you pointed out, it will expire on July 1st. Right. So, you know, we really have a very simple choice ahead of us in terms of whether or not we're going to compound the high rate of debt by just ignoring that increase, or whether or not we're going to do something about this challenge to our country.
And what, just to stay in the sort of tactics of this immediate legislative challenge that you're dealing with, what is the barrier to preventing this interest rate spike from happening?
Well, the president in his budget that he offered does extend the lower rate for at least another 12 months, and he has a pay-for that's built into the budget. My legislation, which, again, Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island has also filed a companion bill, just basically locks in the rate, as you said. You know, it all comes down to priorities. You know, it has a cost to the budget. It's about $4 billion a year. You know, carried interest for hedge funds would easily offset it if people really cared about equity. And but frankly, what we've got to do is just, again, raise awareness about the fact that just like the payroll tax cut expiration, you know, just like the doctor's fees, you know, just like a lot of other programs that have short terms, the fact is that there are really millions of college students around the country that are going to be hurt by this if we don't move.
So at this point in the interview, I can go one of two directions. I could point out that the Federal Reserve is giving the banks and has been giving the banks money for 0%, that they then give back to the United States government for 3%, only to watch the United States government charge our students 6% or whatever this might be, which is an outrage, and it would make my audience upset, and I've done that to them a lot already over the past couple of years. So I want to go in a different direction. We know that the government does not function in a way that is resolving. We all know a lot of problems. We also know that if we don't have an explosive culture of experimentation, particularly among our youth, pursuing all sorts of new ideas and new solutions to problems inside of their communities to around the world, that we will never be able to keep up with the rate of change as high as it is and the demand that our society adapt being as high as it is. What can we all do to emphasize to Washington the imperative to promote an explosion of high-quality experiments from our youth as opposed to the insanity of the current debate?
Well, again, the SOPA and PIPA experience that we just went through does show that even in the world of super PACs and heavy lobbyists, that, once in a while, Mr. Stewart goes to Washington, the mailbag does actually have an impact in terms of D.C. And again, your efforts to focus on this week is certainly a start. We are reaching out to student organizations around the country, Public Interest Research Group and others who are going to start really, raising some higher levels of noise around this. But your point about the damage that this is going to do in terms of lack of experimentation, the dropout rate from college is also definitely, we're seeing, spiking because of cost issues, and nothing could be worse than dropping out with debt, which is sadly a situation that many young people find themselves in. It really should, in my opinion, bring together a broad coalition of people who frankly have plenty of other things to fight about, but certainly every middle-class family who's confronting this, every business that's frustrated with, trying to look for workforce replacement right now as the economy is growing. We've got to address this problem.
If you were to look at the next steps for you or for anybody, because it's clear that we have a gross misalignment of interest between student educational financing, what we're actually teaching people, and the actual jobs that actually exist for people to take. It's become very profitable to loan students money because you terrify them into going to school only to have them actually not be able to find a job. What do you see as, assuming that you can prevent it from getting worse? Right now you're just trying to stop a problem. Right. What do you see as the next form of engagement for all students to stand up and defend their status in this society?
Well, again, there is a sort of a fundamental issue here of priorities, because we have programs like Pell Grants, which, we did invest some money in over the last few years or so. But again, that's starting to plateau and level out, despite the fact that tuition and housing costs are still climbing at colleges and universities around the country. I frankly think the president did a very good thing when he said that, we've got to start looking at the institutions themselves. We've got to start prodding state governments who basically have backed off in terms of higher education support. Going to college now really should be viewed as buying a house for families, which it literally is. And the level of transparency in terms of institutions' graduation rates, their gainful employment rates, their true cost rates. I mean, these are the things that the president has actually said that we have got to start reforming out there, which, again, is going to make some people in the education community pretty uncomfortable. But we have to do this. When you look at the increase of tuition and housing from 1982 to 2008, it was over 400%. Median family income during that same time period was about 180%. We can never sort of keep up, even with, or cutting that huge gap that's grown up, during that time period, and we've got to reform the system.
And the funny thing is that both housing and education lending have the same thing in common, which is the encouragement of both the government and the financial institutions to issue loans from which, under which there's no capital, under which there's no transparency, under which there's short-term benefit for politicians, short-term benefit for bankers, and a huge mess for either homeowners or students. And we appreciate your efforts to at least try to stem some of the bleeding. Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks, Dylan.
All right, coming up, what is your experiment? At one university, the answer to that very question could land you a